In a world of fractured stories, timelines buried, and truths erased, one project dares to ask the question, what if everything you thought you knew about history was wrong? This is GTR, Genesis, Timeline and Roots. A 5,025-year simulated walkthrough tracing a melanated Adam back to 4000 BC. Over the last decade, new revelations confirm a black origin for humanity, from European vaults to tribal memory, Babylon to Britain. This is not just history, this is a challenge, a simulation, a movement. Meet the man behind GTR Dr. Wilton McDonald II, Caymanian, British, Jamaican, haplogroup E and stateless for 26 years. Now a global explorer, 119 countries and counting. A hedge fund lawyer, a UK chartered accountant, a seeker of the lost archives of our people. But the question remains, if all black people came out of Africa, does that make us only African? Or are we also European, Scottish, Native American, Jacobite Hebrew, Asian? GTR exists to answer that question. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. A splinter in your mind. That splinter has brought you here, to GTR. Whites can't trace their roots before the 1800s. Where's ours? Where are the tribes? The languages, the kings, the queens, the true Hebrews? Where did the giants go? Where are the Neanderthals? Angels, aliens? Why do we speak in so many tongues? Was Babel just a myth? A memory? History has holes. Hollywood has lied. The system was never made for us to remember. Only 5 to 8% of people today are white. And what about the 1800 stories and postcards of the cabbage babies? But nearly all history books center their story. That doesn't add up. Atlantis, lost cities, vanished civilizations, or were they erased? Try GTR. Take the red pill and awaken to the truth of your ancestors. Or take the blue pill and keep dreaming a fantasy. GTR. A simulated walkthrough of Black Hebrew history and eschatology. This is the beginning of remembering.
And hello again, Cayman. This is your host, Dr. Wilton McDonald, GTR, Genesis, Timeline, Roots, and I am bringing to you episode 6, which is a deep dive into my own ancestry and my family tree. Now, will open up the program and do live shows and ask the audience to even call in, and we could explore their lines. And there are other Caribbean and families that I have traced, around 50,000 members alone in Cayman and tied to Cayman. And I'd like to help people search for their families, connect to cousins, and just explore their own trees. Some people have reached out to me privately. I'm grateful for them. And I just wanted to be able to tell my story as a McDonald, as someone connected to the Caribbean, and yet I'm African and European at the same time. One thing we should do is explore the primary sources, as I've said before, we have to discover our own truth. The bar keeps slipping, and I will go into that shortly, what I mean by the bar slipping in terms of the stats, which you see online, even what you see and read published by the United Nations on the demographics by ethnicities, just to plug the gap between what we see now and what happened in the past. And again, my background and photo will remain the Moorish quadrille, the painting that I've discovered in Dresden, Germany, one that is not on public display and one that tells a story in itself. Here you have four nobles. We have the King of Poland, Augustus Strong. We have Carl Gustav, a prince in Sweden. We have a count in Germany, and then we have another Polish prince whose castle I visited and saw from the oldest parts of that castle, faces removed from 8 statues carved, in rock. Like so many thousands of images I've seen in North Africa. So I just wanted to have this episode as a tribute to my father, Dr. McDonald Sr. He celebrated his 80th birthday with family and friends in both Cayman and Jamaica. But episode 6 is something that has strong sentimental value, and it just represents some of the work that I'm doing leading to another higher doctorate degree and exploring my own roots and that of the haplogroup E's and people who have the sub-Saharan connections. So I would like to just dive in. Like I covered the primary sources on Beachy Head and ancient Black Britain in the prior episode 5, this episode 7, it's going to look at some of the naysayers. And these are people who present their own version of truth. Of course, we have at the top of the list Dr. Leakey and Professor Dr. Charles Darwin presenting their own theories. There's been a lot of fraud and corruption just all over the internet, and yet people accept their theories as gospel. The other source, now deceased, would be Alex Haley. He's somewhat disgraced. People have borrowed from his work. I would say that the jury is definitely out on that one, because his primary sources connecting to Africa, doubting whether he found his roots, this whole story of Kunta Kinte. And you notice even in the series in the 70s that it had a strong Islamic connection, no Judeo-Christian, no Hebrew roots as portrayed in the stories. And it's incredulous. You have the stories of slaves being taken from Africa and people not exercising just some basic common sense. You have people coming across the ocean in hurricane season in such large number. The numbers keep changing. When I mentioned about the goalpost moving on demographics and population stats, well, as the slaves and the transatlantic slave trade, one day it's going to be 50 million. Up into Calabar in Nigeria, it's 100 million. And then someone say, oh, well, it's 200 million. Why not make it 500 million? The whole global population back then would have been barely 600 million during the so-called 1600s, or I say 600s. But we have to establish some control over these numbers. They keep slipping away. And why it's always inflated is because to bring these amount of people from Africa, then you'd have that perished, thrown overboard, according to the stories. So we have these naysayers, and in opposition to what I'm trying to establish, going against the grain, going against the mainstream. You have, again, Professors Leakey and you have Charles Darwin. And I presented, pieces on evolution, just so unbelievable. And it's harder to believe and have any faith in that from animals and over what length and time. And the time again keeps shifting. Is it going to be 500,000 years? Is it really 100,000 years? Is it 50,000 years? So Alex Haley had his, own theory of his own family coming from Africa. Then, of course, you have people who borrowed from his work, like you have Dr. Gates, we have Paul Crooks, we Richard Ansel Hart started PNP party in Jamaica and wrote about slave trade. You have Rick Kittles, who's doctor and ancestry. And why is it this focus, the matrilineal side, when presenting, scientific? Again, a lot of modern day Jews, Hebrews are figuring out their ancestry based on the maternal side, and they just omit and forget about the paternal side, which would be more in line with scripture, more in line with the Bible. And so we have naysayers. And when you take a look at some of the work, you have Dr. Spencer Wells, and he wrote and he did videos on the pathways of done, of which I'll show shortly. And it's up then to just judge and assess whether that's just, it just appears kosher. A lot of it is based on gross speculation that again make no sense. And in line of the population stats, when you listen to what even someone who Dr. Spencer he has to say, his piece was called "A Journey of Man, a Genetic Odyssey." And even though he looked at the Y chromosome, he was not clear on what the haplogroup groups were. He just talked about the Bushmen, and then he leapfrog into the Australian Aborigines. And even from my private, research and study, that you're about, haplogroups A, D, E, or E being the first. E is the haplogroup that I belong to. And then jumping to S, which is, and I know firsthand experience because I've been to the outback in Australia. I have done more than 2 tests on those out in the back, Lulu and Ayers Rock. And so it is that which is closer to R. And then according to the good, about 10,000 years ago, our ancestry, rule dominate around 10,000 years ago. It's a bit of issue when you all the evidence presented of how it's portrayed from the Bushmen in Africa to sort of the Asian and Indian, so to Mongoloids to Caucasoids, all within a 50,000 year period, but 50,000 plus so 50,000, 52,000 years. You look at it, 35,000 years ago, supposedly Mongoloids were then around at that time, and then 10,000 years ago, the haplogroup R, which he belongs to, him being the typical white guy. He's telling the story about our collective humanity. I wanted just to play a clip from this good Wells to see what he had to say.
I have some information that will surprise you. For the past 15 years, scientists have been using cutting-edge technology to investigate your family history. We've been delving into your distant past, and we've discovered something incredible. It's time we shared it with you.
A long time ago, your family were on the brink of dying out. Yet somehow, against impossible odds, they managed not only to survive, but to become the most successful people on the planet. Come with me, and I'll tell you something that'll change your view of the world. It's the story of your family and how they conquered the Earth.
What if I told you that scientists have discovered a time machine? A portal that has allowed us to see back into ancient history. And what if I told you that for the past 10 years, I've been using this time machine to gather information that has been rewriting history, your history. And where did this information come from?
Blood. It's one of the world's most evocative substances. To many people, it represents the essence of life, a religious sacrament, a gift from the gods. But to me, it embodies the past. Because inside this tiny crimson drop is the greatest history book ever written. It's the story of a journey, the journey of and each of us is carrying a unique chapter.
About living in the present day, in this part of the tree, they've got 2 markers. They clearly trace their descent from this man, but the first marker, remember, arose all the way back there, all those generations ago.
The San Bushman markers are quite unlike any others found outside of Africa. In the world's family tree, their branch is the first to split from the rest. That's how I know they must be the oldest tribe on Earth. And now I'm here with them, looking for clues to find out why their ancient brothers and sisters left this place. The first thing I noticed was their incredible language. They speak with clicks and other sounds totally alien to me.
Continent of India, that people are carrying the signpost in their DNA.
From Africa to Australia, and now, for the first time, the missing link we found in India, the genetic evidence of modern man's first coastal migration to Australia. Most of the route would have been pretty easy, requiring the same beachcombing survival skills learned in Africa. But there was one final obstacle. Even at the height of the Ice Age, the coastline didn't quite reach to Australia.
Started migrating all over the world. Because people living in equatorial Africa are living in a hot environment, the skin must have been able to sweat very efficiently so that people could keep cool. And also because that skin was naked and therefore was prone to damage from ultraviolet radiation. And so the skin of our ancestors was dark, full of the natural sunscreen, melanin.
Sunlight produces vitamin D, vital for healthy bones. At the time my ancestors first ventured into Europe around 35,000 years ago, their skin was already getting paler in order to absorb more light.
And I just had to just cut there, because this is the arrogance and the stupidity, the institutional racism is saying, oh, I'm going to show you about your history, like he's coming to help. And describing those modern white Europeans years ago. Well, that again doesn't make any sense. And the issue of GTR, and I'm happy that we're on a C of R platform, because as our Queen Mother, I call her Queen Mother, Sandy, says, we have to call you out on that. And this doesn't make any sense. So just for people to know, I'm sharing screen here with the estimates. We have current estimates that are now, according to scientists and the UN, about 225 million people living at the time of Christ. That number keeps changing. It was 150 million. It was even 200 million when I did this literally 2 years ago. That number was 200 million. And you could look in the historical vaults, again, just sharing you what the would be today, 225. And they're telling you that at 62 million in East Asia. We had South Asia, 77 million, Eastern Europe, 8 million, Western Europe, 24 million, Sub-Saharan Africa, you had 8 million, Middle East 21 million, Latin America 5 million, and then Western offshoots 1 million, totaling 225 million. That to me, again, does not make any sense. It just does not. So we have today that these are the challenges. I started my journey in my ancestry. The population stats stood at 150 million at the time of Christ. And it's been constantly revised upwards because we have a lot of the gaps that are now showing. You have a percentage of people which are white, which is less than 10%. We have half of the population which would be considered melanated in some shape or form, and that's 4 billion out of the 8. And the rest would be, again, mixed and Asian. But it assumes that the Asians were by far the most populous. So what I wanted to do was just to go back now to the whole journey and why I've decided to create this episode 6, looking at my own ancestry. Now, speaking to our alma mater, Northern Caribbean University, NCU, and they're putting together a legacy book. I was fortunate again to submit a bio, and I wanted to just read and to give people a sketch what is going to go inside this legacy book as McDonald's. I captioned it, it's of 2 McDonald's. We are both products, both my dad and I, Dr. McDonald II, as products of Northern Caribbean University. So it is that we thank Almighty God for putting us on this path to lifelong learning and in this dystopian world while helping many brothers and sisters along the way. And then the McDonald's, including McDonald's, M-A-C, McDonald's, would be included in sort of our family tree, ancestral tracing. How we write our name would be McDonald with 2 lines under the C, and that suggests a missing letter, which should be MacDonald. We have explored many countries, almost 130 in the case of myself, and over 7 continents, and trying to rewrite and to clarify and expand on our melanated history over a 5,026-year Judeo-Christian timeline, going back to a fully melanated Adam in BC 4000, revisiting those melanated Picts who inhabited Scotland and the United Kingdom, and over 1,000 years ago, researching our namesake, Clan Dub MacDonald, and even including melanated Hebrew lines, which would be Yahya on the paternal Y chromosome. Now, the MacDonalds, we all recall the old Scottish songs sung by our great-great-grandfathers and even our grandfathers in Jamaica. The fallen Black Scottish Jacobites intertwine with the melanated Jewish roots, ancient MacDonald family members like Donald I Grumah, was born in 1591, that would be 591, in Capstill, Isle of Skye in Inverness, Scotland. And Donald I is a direct paternal ancestor with DNA-linked relatives in Jamaica, even in Canada in the early 1700s, rather 700s. And the peerage group was contacted on point. And I spoke to Darrell Lundy, who confirmed that this particular line is no longer tracked by the peerage, which we find to be, I would say, just, unbelievable. Now, we've had close paternal ties to what I refer to as Bigmore MacDonald. He was 1695 in Perthshire, Scotland. And we are grateful to NCU for putting us on a path of lifelong learning and a rich spiritual awakening. Now, just as a testimony and a tribute to my father, Pastor Dr. Wilton McDonald Sr., an ordained minister, I wanted to read the citation that was to NCU and to be included in this legacy book. A veteran Seventh-day Adventist worker for over 55 years, recently retired pastor for the Bethany Seventh-day Adventist Church within the Cayman Conference, a post held since 2017. A current host for the weekly devotional radio broadcast Steps to Christ in the Cayman Islands. Pastor McDonald also served as a manager for the Adventist Book and Nutrition Center for 32 years. He also served as the Cayman Islands SDA Conference President, 2007 to 2008, Executive Secretary, Vice President, 1990 to 2007, Mission Conference Treasurer from 1979 until 2000. He was a Ministerial Secretary from 2008 to 2016, and pastor for the following churches: Georgetown SDA, 2013 to 2017, Newlands and Maranatha, 2008 to 2013, Bodentown Church, 2003 to 2007, Northside from 1996 to 2002, Savannah, 1989 to 1996, East End from 1987 to 1989, and West Bay from 1979 to 1987. He's also an accountant, business manager, teacher of accounts, and even Spanish from Bahamas Conference 1970 to 79. He's always been involved in civic, social, and religious activities, and served as the member of chairman of various institutional and organizational boards. A recent Bible teacher at grade 12 Cayman Academy. Dr. McDonald was ordained to the ministry at West Indies Union in 1984, appointed a marriage officer 1985, and Justice of the Peace for the Cayman Islands since 2007. He was awarded the Certificate and Merit Badge of Honor by the late HM Queen Elizabeth II in January 2010. He was also the recipient of a Quincentennial Lifetime Achievement Award in 2003 and an honorary doctorate divinity degree in August 2013 by NCU in Mandeville, Jamaica. Over the years, he's an active participant and sponsor of prison ministries, anti-drug campaigns, evangelistic campaigns, seminars, youth, and community outreach. And he's completed various church building projects, baptized over 1,000 souls, served in almost every department of the church. Born in 1945, on the 4th of December, in Fort William, Westmoreland, Jamaica. Jamaican by birth, now Caymanian and British citizen. A graduate of West Indies College, now NCU, and ICCI. In 1970, was by the Bahamas Conference as business manager and teacher of accounts. Married in August 1971 to Sarita Ramlal, then a teacher at Bahamas Academy. Now she was a vice principal of Cayman Academy and director of the children's ministries in the Cayman Conference. And both are retired. Sarita, my mother, graduated from NCU with an associate's degree, teacher certificate in education in 1970, and completed a master's degree from Andrews University in 1987. And 2 children were born to the union, as 1972 and 1975. My sister Kishala is now Kishala Robinson, a 1994 graduate of NCU with a bachelor's degree in nursing, and followed by a master's degree in nursing admin. And myself, the Honorable Chief Prince Dr. Wilton McDonald II, married to Evelina Sadurska, and 1993 graduate of NCU, amongst other universities and schools. And the union was blessed with 3 grandchildren, Khalil, Maria, and Alexander Wilton III. And I've submitted my bio as well, and I will just emphasize that, I've been an attorney, a lawyer for over 30 years, working with hedge clients globally, pretty much every continent, well, except for Antarctica. And I'm also a fellow, the ACCA in the United Kingdom since 2001. And I was admitted to the bar as an attorney and barrister in Jamaica, the BVI, Cayman, retired in Connecticut, active in New York, and in 2020, admitted as a foreign in Poland. And over the years, I've helped many startups and companies in Cayman around the world. And I established a Via Legal in 2022. I graduated from NCU with a BS and BBA degree, MBA from Andrews, 2-1 honors, bachelor's from UCL, master laws degree from Fordham. I completed the requirement for the Doctor of Juridicals Cornell. I also went to the Bahamas, completed the Council of Legal Education certificate, attended Université de Paris, won the Sorbonne, and I obtained a Doctor of Business Administration degree, Rome, Italy in 2020. And I've completed since then pre- and postdoctoral studies in finance, economics. I have completed postdoctoral research and executive leadership program at Side Business School in Oxford and courses completed at Harvard. I have researched and economics, published in a journal, FASB 133, Accounting for Derivatives, back in 2004. And early to ND25, I established Iberia Gold, and it was rebranded from a company created Iberia Legal. And I've working now with clients in Oceania and Africa, extending reach to Papua New Guinea, UAE, Burkina Faso, Nigeria. I'm also the creator of program GTR, registered trademark in the UK, Genesis Timeline and Roots, based on the 5 years of research leading to another higher doctorate. on the melanated Hebrew history and 5,025-year timeline. On the 29th of November, 2025, Dr. McDonald, myself, I became an Igbo chief in the village of Buki in Cross River State, Nigeria, and assigned the Efik name Ekpo, which means ghost, and a name associated with cultural beliefs surrounding ancestors and the afterlife. And I was sworn in by a royal Buki LGA, who is 115 years old. On December 2nd to 2025, I became a Yoruba High Chief and Prince of the Agaba land in Osun State, Nigeria. Adoptive son of the Agaba King Agba Osun State, and given the following name, Ade Bowale, and translates to the crown has home, derived from three components: Ade, meaning crown or royalty, Bo, meaning has come, and Wale, meaning home. And this name symbolizes a return to one's roots or heritage, often reflecting a significant cultural or familial connection. So, and I remain a Caymanian citizen, British, also now Nigerian, and, well, Jamaican. So there you have it. And this is a citation provided NCU and coming out in the legacy book in the next few weeks. It's been, I would say, 3 years that I've been working on the legacy book. And that is a great achievement. I mean, it's from my father, for the McDonalds, and would just help to tell the story of the history of the McDonalds, and that we have a diverse ethnic background and roots. Now, I wanted to take this time now to deep dive into the family tree. So it is that this is my family tree. And on my paternal side, my grandfather is William Edward McDonald, and he was born November 22nd, 1912. So I have over 1 million persons on this tree. I have been building it for about 5 years. I also cover my mother's line, which surprisingly, her mother's father, the Sibron, is a haplogroup. So basically a white ancestry. And her mother, M, Lillian's Sargar Om's mom, haplogroup M, typical for Indians. And on her father's side, Aja Ramlal, that was her father's father, haplogroup O, typical again for Indians, and traces back to Chennai, Madras, India. No confusion surrounding my mom's ancestry. It's pretty clear. And all the companies back up and say, well, Mrs. McDonald, you are an Indian. My father's side, that is really where you'd said the tire meets the road here. We have his father's father, Daniel, and 1888 to 1928, we have his dad's mom, Hines. And this is where things get interesting if you're just continuing his father's side, William and then James. I've been speaking to family members, and unfortunately, you know, some of the older folk have passed away. I remember speaking to his mother's first cousin, Lily Potts. There were two brothers' kids. So his mom being Daphne, her father was Potts, projected to be haplogroup R, again, typical white. George's brother, William, Lil Potts, was William's daughter. So they would have been first cousins. So his mom, Daphne, passed in 1983. And Lil Potts lived into her 90s. She was 94. She passed within the last 3 years. And I managed to speak to her, and she confirmed me the connectivity between Fort William and Green Island in Hanover. And that's where my dad's ancestors, paternal ancestors, that's where they lived. It looks like they had some flooding. Perhaps they moved from Green Island and then they went inland in the mid 1800s. I've tracked the ancestry to St. Paul's, Little London, Grange Hill, Morgan's Bridge. This information that, according to Lily, they were taking ants from Green Island, from Hanover, inside of Jamaica, internally into Fort William. And Fort William has always been a quaint place. I remember the history and going there for the first time. Not a lot going on. But surprisingly, when you look at the map of Jamaica going back, 400 plus years ago, you're going to see something totally different. When you look at this map of Jamaica, Fort William has made the cut. Trying to show you this old map of Jamaica, but Fort William is on this map. You have other places like Edinburgh, Aberdeen. This is a 400-year-old map that I uncovered in Scotland, and Fort William is on there. And that's the full map of Jamaica, all those places which have really Scottish-sounding names. There's no Kingston, there's no Montego Bay, there's no St. Elizabeth. Even the place that my mom is from, Clarendon, it doesn't show up on this map. Roughly 400 years old. And so how the story has been told is that my father's father, William Edward, he was very strict ancestry. My aunt was telling me that when she first moved more than disciplinarian years ago, or even then, definitely 40 years ago, she saw, the currencies there, and then she, read up on John McDonald, and that Canada's first minister. And when she saw, pictures, she was like, well, that of at least, Daniel, that would have been William's father, Daniel McDonald. And she, as age 10, she recalls seeing Daniel. I look through this. That's the image of the first Prime Minister of Canada. Now, white guy, but somewhat curly hair, thick nose. This is what my Aunt Mabel recalls that Daniel resembled. Not that they're related, not that, there's any connection. This gentleman came from Scotland, but she reminded her of what it looked like. Now, when you look at all the McDonalds that extensively, here is Hezron McDonald. And when you look through all of the imagery of the McDonalds, you'll see that there's some commonality. It's my son, it's myself, dad. Costa, my closest relative, still 108 years old, a haplogroup E. This gentleman is Herbert Charles. Yes, he's white, but he has our E DNA. Here is Alan Alexander McDonald, Scottish. And this is this is John McDonald from Grenada, haplogroup E. So when you look across, see all these men, all being haplogroup E's of them. You start questioning and say, well, is this just happened that this is just random? And they were located all over the Caribbean and the Americas. Herbert Charles was born in Georgia. A lot of these men, this is my father's father, William Edward McDonald, and this is Horace. He's in Jamaica. This is Orlando, who is Cuba, and he has the MacDonald name, the MAC MacDonald. This is Joseph Mark, Yushim in Cayman. He does the tinting work, express tinting. He's a cousin, haplogroup E. This is Chris, and he's still alive. He's in Grenada. This gentleman is Oret, runs a music studio. In all of these, it's just random, DNA that they're just simply, matching up one another. So when you look at our story and our history, our ancestry, looking at even different Sir John McDonald, first Prime Minister of Canada. And I could not figure out, from it, who his most relative was. You don't even have a portrait of his father, just a gravestone. And the problem with some of these McDonald's, a lot of these McDonald's that I'm connected to, or even those that, suggest that resembled some of my relatives, like in the case of John Sir McDonald, is that there's lacking of a male to have searched and combed through the records and graves in Green Island for other siblings of the James. Because from what we gathered is from my father, then William, Edward, his dad, and then Daniel William, who was born somewhere around 1840, and then James was born in the late 1700s in Scotland. The issue is trying to find suitable males to test, and the lines just go cold. There's a lot of females, and some of the females, they were married into other lines. But the problem is trying to find and search for suitable males to test, because I'm interested in the Y chromosome matches, which seems not to be popular. You have, as I said before, people like Rick Kittles at African Ancestry, and that's an autosomal test. So it doesn't really test much, more than 8 markers. And he made it clear publicly that they test maternally. And then, of course, the whole Jewish tracing and ancestry is based on maternal tracing. Well, one academic, Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson, focuses on the Y, and his work establishes the timeline of about 5,000 to 6,000 years. And most of us would assume and accept that it's 6,000 years, BC 4,000. But the thing that I've gotten playing that video by Dr. Spencer Wells, who I just completely discredit. I mean, he's talking about 10,000 years to be modern man. Of course, he's counting himself as the modern Europeans, and 35,000 years for Asians, and 50,000 years for the African Bushmen. I just don't comprehend, even if you accept that the global population was 220 million at the time of Christ. People are not having kids. What disasters happen in a place that would cull and cut the population down. And that number during the time of Christ keeps growing. It was at 150 million when I first was keeping tabs, and now it's at 225 million. Maybe it'll be at 300 million. I've seen some reports that they're now arguing that the population during the time of Christ is 300 million. In another few years, it might reach 500 million. But when we look at the population during the 1600s and 1700s, there's no doubt population was about 700 million. So they could continue to increase that number between the time of Christ and the 1700s, which in my mind is the 700s, because the Dark Ages were never dark. They were just made up. They don't tell the full story. We can't find any chain of custody for like the Bayeux Tapestry, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. We don't know much about the Normans, how they lived, how the Vandalic tribes and the Germanic tribes at large, how they lived. How did they live, and how did they impact populations, the world, because they conquered and sacked Rome in 476. There's that missing timeline, which again were just made up. So this gentleman's timeline, it sort of goes on to a mysterious sort of ancestor, the Caucasus region, to one of the cabbage baby links, orphan trains. That's very real. And I go back to my own family tree, and going to my father's line and going back to James and opening up the pathways. There are missing stories. We have people that are no longer tracked. They're invisible. They're made invisible. Or we have accounts of the clan McDonald's, who, by the way, they're selling Armadale. They're selling lands in Scotland. They're just getting out of town. They have divorced themselves, I guess, of their history. And who knows, it'll probably be bought up by the Chinese. Who knows? But a year now, they're going to sell the estates. So there will be no history as far as their history. Then we have James IV. All these people are mysterious people. Most of them were Jacobites, and they were melanated Jacobites. Donald III and the Cromwell impacts made. Cromwell was a black man, yes. I mean, Oliver Cromwell walking around making trouble and killing and maiming. James again, John, all the biblical names. And that's true. Hezron, David, Daniel, melanated Jewish Hebrew names. And this in 1591, we're back to him. Here it is that the peerage, glorious peerage group that track royals in UK, history of him, his ghost. And rightfully so, before Donald, I've hit a roadblock, common ancestors. And when I have just sort of built this tree up, I use triangulated matches, best evidence. God knows it's a challenge. I've come across so many instances where I tried to trace and track my relatives, to find Daniel. Oh, they used to be buried at home. Well, it's a dirt grave. Can't find the markers in Little London, St. Paul's. Or you have the case of James, where he moved from Green Island to Morgan's Bridge in Westmoreland, which is now Grange Hill, and asking the real estate, the property desk in the Jamaican government to help track down his home, because a lot of Jamaica still to this day, they're buried at home, trying to find his home, the last resting place in the around 1870, or when James passed. But the problem is that they have an automated kicked online and was started like 3-4 years after James passed. So that annual records are really up to that point. So James didn't make the cut in terms of have his online. You can see the deaths, a little bit clues of where he lived. And I visited the Anglican church in Grange Hill, and they said, oh, there was a cholera epidemic, and so he might be in that section where they have a lot of dirt graves. All of this is just time and energy, and it was spent trying to find grave markers, trying to find resting places of my paternal ancestors. And the parish reverend and head and priest said, look, sorry, we burnt the records because they were moldy. So James didn't make the cut. Everything was 4 or 5 after he passed. The manual from government, maybe it can't be located and can't access them. And then the church records, because the church had their own books. Anglican church in Grange Hill, they burnt pretty much all the records. They were moldy. And so that is that for good old James. And for Daniel, he might have been buried at home, dirt grave, and have squatters in Little London or St. Paul's in Westmoreland. And I've been there, said hi, hello to them, not to upset anyone, and just couldn't find a marker, couldn't find a house or some place that could have been the main house. I have to go one day with some metal detector, but even then, casket might not have been metal, could have been some wooden box. We'll see, but I'm searching nonetheless. But I did get from the locals, the elderly, that Daniel was a miserable man, and he was none of fair skin. Again, hearing the accounts of my Auntie Mabel about John McDonald the Vista, and he resembled, not that he was a white person, but even John McDonald, when you look at the images, you could see with his big nose and the curly hair that obviously he looks mixed, with no picture and photo of his father, of Sir John's father. So when it comes to family tree tracing, I hit a brick wall and I can overcome with, then I would put common ancestor markers down. And I'm opening it up. And we have the periods of that I am not sure of. I will be very open and honest with that. I have common, after the ancestral mark, are we looking at our 500s? Being true to GTR, because of the year, according to some of the academics, and I know some people brand them as pseudoscientists, and that again is a subject for another discussion, because what is truly testable? What can be boiled down to the true essence and empirically proved at 100%? At 100%, nothing. absolutely this world can be proved at that level. And if everyone disagrees, they simply need it. It just can't be proved at that level. So they say an assumptions are made for everything. So are we looking at the 1500s or 500s? Even the 1400s, are we looking at the 1400s or the 400s? And so that's where it gets dicey. But I wanted to show that this line connects. So we go past. There was Donald, Lord of the Isles, famous guy, like where the MacDonald gets his name from. Now, the group of haplo Rs, they're claiming very, very forcefully and vehemently that this line would be R, R's being prototypical white. Well, Dr. John Johnson, yes, he has been documenting the images of these ancients, like Sir Robert King, Scotland, 1325, and the person is black. He's been documenting the Stuart lines, and Stuart also means Schwartz. And those that know a bit of German, Schwartz is melanated or black. And we have Robert the Bruce, the real Robert the Bruce now, and how he's showing up according to Dr. John Johnson, who wrote the book Negro Rulers of Scotland, as a brother born in 1274, 274. Some of these timelines will just mash and merge into each other. And some of these characters invented, but what were the color of the skin? And I just go along with some of the conventional photos and put it on. But where I see bits of truth, where I see efforts made by people like Dr. John Johnson, I will change the profiles. So we are moving in time now. Orkney, and I did visit Orkney in the Isles, northern Scotland. There they claim the Neolithic people just vanished. Reminds me of the people in Peru, where in Machu Picchu, for those who have visited, just poof, they just kind of disappeared. And the people in England in Stonehenge, who say built Stonehenge, they kind of disappeared too. And that place is Wiltshire, for my own namesake, Stonehenge, for those who visited. And people in Machu Picchu, they disappeared, they just up and ran away. People of Orkney, the Neolithic people, which they're saying they're BC 5000. I mean, that breaks my timeline. BC 6000. All of these people here documented a first Orkney link. Now, was that the year 1000 or the first century? Was it the year 30? Again, time of Christ, before he died. Was it Scotland at that time? What year are we looking at? But what I do know is that at some point, the whole Scottish lines will get merged into common ancestor, check again, the Yaya Davidic lines, which is going to be haplogroup E, not R, but E. And here it is that we pick up personalities and people like we have Kenneth MacAlpine, king of the Picts, the Pictish people. And he was called the Niger. And Niger means God or authority in Hebrew and also Yoruba. And we his figure. Now, we living in the true 800s? Or again, was it closer to the time of Christ? Some of these lines need to be, and revisited. We have these centuries going back in time. We're going back in time. And at some point we said, look, we're merging with the Davidic lines. And Al-Ali, I have different rabbis that have been working on these lines. And I have imported their information so we can literally go back further in time. But all these gentlemen would have been haplogroup E's, and going all the way back to David. I use the connectors because, again, it makes, for the sake of seeing the forest and not get just bogged down by the trees. And we're dealing with a subject matter, the crossroads of archaeology with biology, biochemistry, history, religion, almost every discipline under the sun that we're kind of dealing with, where there's a lot of academic fraud and corruption. and people just fudging the numbers. So I again, trying to trace back using best evidence that takes me back to those ethnicities that I covered before. Are we looking at 60 million Asians at Christ? Are we looking at only 8 million blacks during the time of Christ? Because that, I kept this up for the longest while. At some, is this all believable? 60 million from East Asia, only 8. So they only had 8 million black people during of Christ. That's what they are asking us to believe. That's just quite shocking. And so with the background of the Morse quadrille in the 700s, and I'm not going to even say 1700s, the 700s, then what do you make of it? How can you have all these melanated people when the population was just 600 to 700 million? And there it is, they're telling you that the global population at the time of Christ is just about 220 million. If you're to track these demographics and try to trace them back, you're going to run into serious problems. And then this is why they keep fudging the numbers and inflating and deflating. So they're inflating the non-black numbers clearly, and deflating the black colors. I mean, so this is what we are presented with. And we have to establish, truth for ourselves. It takes me the quaint. I could just stare at hours of work, supposedly about 1798, or the map of where can someone just tell me that they would label the island with all these Scottish names, and why Fort William, a place that my father and his father are attached to, appears on this ancient map. In fact, it's not just about my father and his father, William Edward, but other McDonalds. Guess what? Orrit would be from Arthur's Seat, which takes you closer to the Mandeville area. And other McDonalds clearly would be from Glasgow. And the Green Island, Hanover, that's Elgintown at the very top of the map. And you have Morningside, you have Aberdeen, nearer to St. Mary. You have Stirling Castle and Duckeld. There's Leith Hall, which is Portland. I did find some McDonald's, and I'm running their tests are being analyzed right now, and that's going to be revealing. There's another person, note the Honorable Hugh MacDonald, his DNA being analyzed, and fortunately, I was a living male descendant. So the question is it going to be R, or is it going to be? Those are the opposites. I mean, I am not a biochemist. I am not a scientist. I'm curious as to my own background. I'm a lifelong, student. And what I could, you really have those two polar opposites. You have the R, but you also have the O. In case of my mom's, there's R and O. O, typical Chinese, and R being and today's historians are putting R in the whole historical timeline up to 10,000 years ago. So we have R and O on one side, and then E being the oldest, most populous haplo, and you have A, B, C, D, and those are the polar ends. For women, it would be L for one side for melanated original mankind, and then 8 would be on the other side, whether it be Caucasus or Meadow Cabbage Baby linked. And it's not a derogatory label.
Thanks for watching GTR Episode 6 Part 1. Join us next week as we continue Episode 6 Part 2. GTR Publishing.
A Data Dreads production.